You don't, and I don't either, but you're sort of reverting to that conservatism that you identified as your younger, with
yeah,
your younger years.
When I started out, well, I opposed the Iraq War. I didn't like the Bush administration. I didn't vote for George Bush, so I don't think I'm going back to being a conservative. But there were things that I picked up for my years as a conservative, and maybe that has stuck with me. I don't believe the voice of the people is the voice of God, and I do think that we have to have an open conversation about the limits of the public. And what could actually be more democratic than that? Democracy is all about having a conversation, getting it out there, no taboo subjects. Let's talk about it. So let's talk about it. But this is the last taboo. You know, we can talk about the shape and size of the president's penis, but we can't talk about the weaknesses in public.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Back this motherfucker up right now. At what point in American history did we discuss the president's penis? Can someone in the chat room enlighten me? I don't remember talking about the size and shape of an American president's penis, nor would I want to have that discussion. It could be curved, shaped kind of like a banana. It could be small and very withdrawn, not interested in attention and intermingling with the public, rather reserved, sort of pointed down into the right small, feeling a little bit inferior, kind of like the kid that always sits in the back of the class, even though he's a pretty smart kid. You know, he looks like Buster Poindexter's left testicle, and he doesn't want attention for that fact, so he sits low. That could be an American president's penis. What about the big Jolly Roger motherfucker hanging down to the knees? All of that, I don't care about that. We discussed Clinton's penis. I don't recall that. Shape and size? Can someone please inform me? Because I missed the memo. What is the shape and size of Bill Clinton's penis? I mean, that's what we're interested in here. Nixon had a chode. See, I don't even know what a chode is. I've got to watch more pornos. I have to, because I know that's got to be X-rated, Aaron. His penis is buried in pubes. LBJ. Long bitches Johnson. Is that what you're saying, Kim? Well, let's continue with this, because fucking A is what I'm saying, and fucking B and C as well. We'll get to vowels, more vowels later. But first, let's do some more consonants, is what I'll say.
There's a paradox. And let's talk about another paradox in American history. Over the last half century, Americans have become smarter and smarter, at least in terms of schooling. In 1940, 6 out of 10 Americans hadn't gone past the 8th grade. Today, most Americans have gone to college. And yet, during this same period that Americans are getting more and more schooling, our politics are getting dumber and dumber. We need to explain that paradox. We need to be talking about it. Now, that's democracy, to talk about that.
And your explanation has to do with the schools and what goes on inside of them, or with the media and the way it contradicts, in a very real sense, with its emphasis upon entertainment, essentially, rather than information.
Yeah, well,
where are you in
this? It's a very complicated series of forces that led us to this situation. And it begins with the schools not teaching civics, and not placing an emphasis on civics, and not placing an emphasis on history. And certainly over the last 8 years with the No Child Left Behind Act, which leaves behind history, doesn't test for history, so teachers have stopped teaching history, so the generation coming up is even dumber. And then we go to broader forces in the society, and we've got television, which just upends our politics. First of all, it helps destroy the two-party system. Once television gets into the act, it's the people who run television, it's consultants, it's TV directors, news directors, who wind up running politics as opposed to party bosses. And people used to take their cues from party bosses. The much reviled party bosses like Daley in Chicago, they would send a signal down the ranks, down the line, to the people who were voting, and people were getting their cues. So even if they weren't all that knowledgeable about the issues, they were taking their cues from party bosses, from labor bosses, and of course the decline of labor unions plays into this. So it's a complicated mosaic. But if I had to pick one thing It's this box. It's this box with wires. And I've been in television for years. I've been in and out of academia, and when I'm out of it, I've been in the television business. And, you know, there's nothing more shallow than broadcast corporate television. And it's shallow for a reason, because the people who are watching the television sets don't have much knowledge. And so there's a constant emphasis to talk about something that is not going to go over the heads of the audience. So instead of having a conversation up here, the conversation is always down here. When I was helping run a local news station, the CBS affiliate in Seattle, KIRO-TV, we did $1 million study when I first came in to figure out, what does the audience want? What are they interested in? Politics was last on their list, dead last. First and foremost was weather. They loved weather. They wanted to know about the weather. They wanted to know about traffic. They wanted to know about sports. They wanted to know about earthquakes in Seattle, because we have the threat of earthquakes there. But politics, forget it. So, as a managing editor, which was my position, every night when I'm trying to program for my newscast, I insisted that we have politics, because just as a matter of good conscience, I could not have politics. But often you're leading with Keiko the whale. Now, I have to tell you, I had to finally get out of the business because I just couldn't bear it anymore. I couldn't.
Now, wait the fuck a minute. Wait the fuck a minute. We backing this bitch up again. I want y'all to listen. Beep, beep, beep. That's my reverse shit going off. I got lights flashing. I got rear view camera enacted. Why are we going to pick on the whale? People like the whale. What American news organizations give people now, what they want. It is no longer the business of giving people the important events decided rationally and reasonably by the critical thinking minds and the editorial staff. What they're getting now is a sundae with hot fudge on it and some nuts, if they're not allergic to them. That's what they give them now. You don't even have to eat your chicken McNuggets. That sauce, we don't know what that is. You don't need that. Forget about the sauce. You're going straight to the goddamn sundae. Okay? That's what you're getting. So why are you going to pick on a whale? I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Later on in this very episode, right off the top of my head, we're gonna call a whale. I swear to God, I'm calling. I'll probably call a sperm whale, maybe be a humpback, maybe a killer whale, because they're talkative. They do shit. I got to give credit to the killer whales, because they're very smart. I'm going to tell you a little thing later if I remember, and if I don't, then I won't tell you anything at all. And we'll just keep going with this interview, such as I'm going to do right this moment.
Why do you think? And I gather from your book, and from other things you've said and written, and from what you do with your History News Network, I gather you're hopeful. How can you be hopeful? You're describing the nature of human nature. Yeah. And we respond to it. We reflect it.
Sure. Well, one, by nature, I'm an optimist. So
I thought you were a conservative.
I'm a liberal, but I had my origins in my conservative days, but no, I'm an optimist. And I do think that there are steps that we can take as a society if we commit to it. What we need is kind of a Sputnik civics program nationwide. If here's a good concrete example of what I think we could do that would really change things for the next generation. Every college and university in America that receives public funding ought to require freshman students to take a current events quiz every single week for their first year.
You mean read the newspaper?
Actually, read the newspaper. I was teaching graduate school at a university in Washington, D.C., in journalism. And I had graduate students in journalism who weren't reading the paper. And it was obvious when one day in the 1990s, 3 weeks after Denny Hastert had become the Speaker of the House, I just asked the class, because I was talking about him, and I realized they were kind of like giving me blank stares. I said, well, who is the Speaker of the House? And it was dead silence. And then one kid, raised his hand and he said, Hastert? And he was, really unsure. And I was like, yes. I said, Denny Hastert. Well, it was at that point I said, okay, You are journalism students. You're going into the business presumably because you love journalism. You're going to be writing stories. That's what we're teaching in this class, is how to write news stories. And what's happening here? You're not reading. I said, who do you think is going to read all the stuff that you're going to write if you're not reading it? So I said, that's it. We're going to start having weekly quizzes. Well, by the end of the term, they were reading the New York Times. They were reading the Washington Post. They were much better educated. And I felt like I've done something. Why can't we do that in every college and university? It would have an enormous impact. And if the society communicates the idea that it's not just money that is important, but civics is important, I think you could change the society.
Now, when you go to the Stewart show, the Jon Stewart show, are you going to say that? Are you going to say, hey, I can't stand it that I or a guy by the name of Hefner ask his students where do they get their news about the world around them, and they say from Jon Stewart?
I'm happy that they pick up some information from whatever source they can, as long as it's halfway reliable. The Stewart show is actually fairly credible. Of course, as he always says, it's a fake news show, and he says he's shocked that people are using his show as a source of information, and that is shocking. College students in particular, it's a gift. Education is a gift. You're not making the most of your gift if you are getting your information from the Jon Stewart show rather than from the morning newspaper. I mean, to me, reading the New York Times every day is almost an act of religion. I have to do it. I've been doing it since the 7th or 8th grade when I grew up in Hohokus, New Jersey, and they had us kids get subscriptions to the New York Times at a discount to get us into the newspaper reading habit. And to me, you know, if you're a kid and you're going to college and you're paying thousands of dollars per course, think of it this way. The New York Times every morning is like a high-level seminar in American politics, and it's free. You can go on the internet and it's free. And I think the digital divide is collapsing. Most people have access to the internet. Do yourself a favor. Spend 5 minutes. I take maybe sometimes up to 2 hours to get through the paper. There's so much in there. Okay, a student, you've got a lot to do. Fine. Take 5 minutes. Find one meaty story on the front page. Read it all the way through to the end. Dip into the op-eds. And over 6 months, you'll start to get that knowledge so that the political conversation isn't taking place above your head.
So that the political conversation isn't taking place above your head. The New York Times. All right, so I want you to think about what this guy said. You know he's relatively intelligent. He spoke well. There were several areas he could have tripped up there. He was a little passive. He wouldn't state his political claim, would he? I'm conservative. I'm liberal. I'm a jock, man. I'm a cock. I don't know. I'm a little flimsy, a little flabby. I'm flaccid, but I don't do acid. You know what I'm saying? So you can't just dance around that. You are what you are. All right, your beliefs are going to put you somewhere on the spectrum between liberal and conservative and, you know, libertarian way up north there. If people get a little funky and want to, you know, the types of people that like to watch Fargo, you know who I'm talking about. Let's not beat around the bush, but let's beat the bush itself. If you have one, if you've shaved it, just smack the skin part, and it sounds just like that right there. And more like, let me see, more like that. Let me do a little faster. Yeah, like that. That's what it. If you don't have a bush, it's like. See, that's doing a special song with your PUD. Now, this guy seemed to think that what's missing in America, think about this for a minute. This very well-spoken man who's going on several major talk shows, civics, history, and the New York Times. That's all we need. That's all we're missing. So I'm just going on what he didn't say here. You know me. I guess our physics is okay. Our science in general is okay. Our biology, we've got it on lockdown. Our English, we're in full command. It's the civics, the history, and the news presented in the New York Times. Now, I may be splitting hairs here for those of you that have hairs and aren't smacking the PUD. But I think we're missing a little bit more than that. See, there's a thing that comes with a decent education about your country that is almost always in lockstep with pride for that country. People who are not very proud of their country, they don't really care about it much. It's just like, look, I want to make it through my fucking day. I got goats to herd. I got crack to buy. and I got several hermaphrodites to fuck. I got a schedule here, and I'm not trying to